to go about it?
Yeah, if I had confidence, but it's hard to get confidence.
You know, I don't know that I have the wherewithal or the knowledge or the stomach for it.
We get it, and we're here for you with Investing 101. Welcome to Money Unscripted, a podcast from Fidelity Investments. I'm Ally Donnelly. Whether it's stocks, options, asset allocation, diversification, today we want to demystify investing. If you're thinking about making your money work harder, this is the episode for you. We're going to cover, how do you know when you're ready to invest? How much do you need to get started? How do you balance that question of paying off debt versus investing, and how to figure out what to invest in, or if you want to have someone invest for you? So let me introduce Fidelity's Ryan Victorin. She helps clients create financial plans for their unique and specific needs. And she's going to help us understand how to use investing as a tool to help us reach our goals. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let me get right into it. As we talk to people and ask them about investing, we kept hearing these kind of common themes of lack of understanding, thinking they didn't have enough money to invest, and then what to invest in. So first and foremost, answer this question. Why do I want to invest?
Well, the big why is because you want your money to work as hard as you do for your money. And I've actually changed that to say harder than you do for your money. It's what gives us agency to have freedom down the road. And it's so important to try to grow the assets over time as opposed to just save the money that you've got.
Let's map that out a little bit. Saving versus investing.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that it is actually a two-step process. So you obviously have to save your money. But I want to give you an example of the power of why we actually invest, like you said before, but with dollars associated with it.
Okay.
So, and I'm just going to use an example of what's called a conservative portfolio. So a little bit of risk and versus just leaving it in a bank account, sitting, making almost no, interest. Let's say we take $5,000. All right. And after 10 years, we've just kept it in our bank account and you might get like $30 in interest over that decade. Okay. So after 10 years, you still have $5,000. Okay, plus or minus a few dollars. Maybe a little bit of interest could have come along the way.
Yeah.
Let's say you took one step away from that and just put it in something conservative. After the end of 10 years, you might have over $8,000 at the end. And then, now I'm using a $5,000 example. Add a zero to that. Add a couple zeros to that. Like you can see how it can really compound over time. And it's very powerful to actually invest after you save the money.
I hear that. And of course, we all want to make our money work harder. But as I think of my finances overall, how do I consider when I should start investing or if I'm in good shape to be investing? And I want to hear from Jenny first. So let's have a listen.
I'm a mother of a child with disabilities. So my focus has only and ultimately been my son. And honestly, the thought of investing anything wasn't there because my son's health was priority, but actually I should have been thinking of it because he is my priority.
So you hear that, and balancing priorities is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as moms, like we tend to just give to others right before we're giving to ourselves and not realizing that actually investing will give us freedom to give to others later on. I have to encourage you to actually look to do that so that you can, have more choices down the road. And the way that we do that is to build that financial foundation. And where that starts is with your emergency savings. So the general guidelines here is about 3 to 6 months of your expenses. Now, everybody has what I call a sleep at night number. They're like, Ryan, if I don't have X amount of dollars in the bank, I'm awake at night. I'm stressed. My blood pressure is like through the roof. Okay. So like, what's that number? But making sure that it, works for you. Okay. At the same time, there is available to some people is something called a 401k contribution at work. And sometimes companies even have what's called a 401k match, which means whatever you put in, they put in to a certain percentage based on the company. So I kind of want you to build both of those first, which is build an emergency savings, but also make sure that you're working towards getting that company match as well. And I say working towards because this isn't an overnight thing for a lot of people, right? Even, I don't care if it's $30, $50 a week or a month, work towards those two goals. Once you have that foundation put in place, so emergency savings, and you're actually saving enough to get that company match, then we can start to think about maybe investing.
Sometimes it's not financial. Sometimes it's a mental barrier, right? So we hear that from the people we talked with, and I know you hear it all the time. So it's those, I know I should be investing, but yet I'm not because. Let's take a listen.
I'm scared of losing the money. I'm scared of putting money in and then it losing all its value. And then now I'm out.
Yeah.
All the money I put in. So yeah, that's the biggest thing holding me back is just the fear of not successfully investing.
I feel like I don't have a ton of guidance with regards to like how much is too much or how little is too little, especially when I have other competing costs like daily living and paying off my student loans.
I'm frankly not sure whom to trust.
So talk to me about the mental barriers
Yes.
to investing.
Yes. Something I say all the time is we should all over ourselves. So first, remove the judgment, okay, from what you should or shouldn't do. Yes, I know I'm saying there's power of investing, but don't put so much pressure on yourself is the first one. So we kind of get in our own head saying, I know I should have done this, but I haven't started yet.
Yeah.
And then we kind of do nothing, right?
Yeah, or there's that embarrassment factor of like, oh shoot, everyone else is investing and I haven't, so I'm embarrassed. I don't want to say anything.
Totally. Just move it aside is what I would, say to people. But fear is a huge component of sort of mental barrier. And that fear could mean a lot of things. Fear could mean, oh my gosh, I'm worried about the ups and the downs of the markets. I'm worried that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm fearful to ask a question for that judgment that we were saying before. So we just kind of have push through it is what I'm saying to people out there. Another really important one is that this perception that investing is only reserved for the wealthy. And it's just absolutely not true.
You tell me that this is one of the biggest questions and most common questions you get. And when we went out and talked with people, we found that to be true as well. Let's have a listen.
I guess like depending on how much I make per month, what would the ideal amount be to start at?
I mean, you think about it, like how much do I need to really start investing to start investing?
Yeah. So you need $1.
I hear you say that. And I'm like, what is $1 going to get me?
Okay. So $1, just $1 is not really going to move a lot of needles.
Right.
Okay. But when I think about that from, like your 401k contribution, your emergency savings is built, where should your next dollar go? And then every savings after that. So again, I bring it down to just $1, but my point is I don't care if it's $30, $50, maybe it's way more than that. And that's awesome. But you don't have to have oodles of money to start investing. In fact, it's investing that starts to get you more money in the back end.
Okay. So if I have debt, how do I look at that? Would I be better served to put that 30 or 50 to pay down my debt, or just kind of where does debt come into the debt versus investing conversation?
Yeah. Also a really common and very important question. And I would say it depends on the debt itself. And so I'll give you some examples. So credit card debt, as an example, is a really difficult one. It can have interest rates in the teens or the 20s, and that can get away from you quickly. So I'd want to balance paying off things like credit card debt before we start thinking about investing, or at least having a plan to do so. But then there's other types of debt, like a mortgage, that's kind of designed to pay off over time, that tends to have much lower interest rates. And that's okay to pay off over time. So it kind of depends on the debt, depends on the interest rate tied to it.
So I've addressed my emergency savings. I feel like my debt is in a good place. I feel ready to invest. What comes next?
Okay, so next you have to think about what type of investor are you, or that you want to be. I'm going to break it down into 3 kind of questions you want to ask yourself. Again, judgment-free zone. So first, do you have the knowledge to do this?
Yeah.
Do you feel confident in your knowledge base for what to invest in? Okay. Second is, do you actually want to do this? Is this something that you have an interest in, that you want to take time
Like
to
you want to
do
do
this?
it yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then third, do you have the time to do this?
Yeah.
Or are you willing to spend the time on it? Right.
Yeah.
This third one tends to be the thing that gets in the way the most for people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I use this as, for my personal example all the time. I'm the mom of 8-year-old twin boys, which I call, it's like living with 2 tornadoes. Okay. That doesn't even include my husband.
And they're
okay?
not even teenagers yet.
No, they're only 8. They're already eating me out of house and home already. Okay. But I'm busy, right?
Yeah.
A working mom. My husband works as well. So as a mom, I have to decide what are the things that I'm going to outsource and get some help with of all the things in my life.
Right.
And what are the things that I want to take ownership to? Investing is just another one of those things.
Yeah.
So you have to decide, where are you with the time, to dedicate to that?
Let's simplify the investing process. Walk me through, I know broad strokes, but kind of step by step, and then let's dig in.
1, you have to actually open the account that you're going to invest in. 2, You have to put money into the account. That's the savings piece we were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
3, and this is where the willing, the interest, the time starts to come in.
Yeah.
You actually have to choose the investment. So do the research and figure out what you want to actually invest in. 4, you actually have to go buy it. You have to place the trade. That's a, saving and investing, like I said, 2-step process. And then you have to maintain that portfolio. And I use the word maintain very purposefully because we don't just sort of check in on an annual basis and see if everything is okay. You have to maintain to make sure it's always working towards the goals that you have down the road.
Let's jump to number 3, because if you're already feeling a little nervous or overwhelmed, or you're getting agita about the investment process overall, then you think about, oh boy, now I have to choose my investment. So we get a lot of questions on this. Here's a few.
I don't even know all the different ways to invest. So maybe knowing which ways I could do it, and then which would be the best option for me in terms of where I am in my life right now.
What would be a good investment?
How will I know when I have enough? Yeah, I mean, I want to be able to retire at a reasonable age, and I don't want to work too long and not be able to enjoy what should be my golden years. So I need to know when I have enough.
I have one kid going to college right now. And I've got 2 more to go. Neither my husband or I have the time to do the research. In the meantime, the money's sitting in the checking account.
Yeah. So I think it really actually starts with what your goals are. I actually frame it in the following way: the who, the what, and the when. Who are the important people we're planning for? What are the things you're hoping to accomplish? And when are they happening? So let me give you some examples. Let's say you're saving for college and you want to invest for the future. Do you have a 15-year-old and it's in a few years? Do you have a 2-year-old and it's a long time, away? Or let's say retirement is a huge goal for most people.
Yeah.
Is it 30 years away? Is it 3 years away? And you're starting to invest for that. So the longer the time horizon, the time until your goal, the farther away from it is, the more risk you can take, because it's longer you can tolerate the ups and downs in the market. But if the goal is really close, we want to just be a little bit more careful with the way that we do that. So time is really important, but what are the actual goals you have as well? That's where to start with the framework that you can comprise for yourself. So in addition to that, you also want to think about something that is called your risk tolerance. Again, more jargon that we're trying to demystify here. We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And to me, the most important word in that is tolerance. What types of ups and downs can you tolerate and stay invested? So what are you comfortable with over time?
Okay. So as we're thinking about comfort levels, right? Like knowledge is definitely going to be one of those. So let's define some of our investment choices.
Yes.
Want to start with stocks and bonds?
Yeah, let's start there, because that's really the big, what we call asset classes: stock, bonds. Okay, so let me explain what each one of those are. A stock is you purchase one slice, or commonly known as a share, of a company. And your performance, how that does, is tied to whatever that company does. Now, it tends to be riskier on the scale because it's however that company does.
Right.
Versus bonds, which is actually a loan. So if I'm buying a bond, I'm loaning money to a company. It could be a government, it could be an agency. And at the end of a certain period of time, which you set up at the start, you would generally expect to get that money back. Doesn't always happen. We can't say guaranteed, but at the same time, it tends to be a bit more stable than the stocks that tend to go up and down, and you get interest along the way. So that's the difference between those two things. One's a little bit riskier, one's a little bit more stable, generally speaking.
How about mutual funds and ETFs?
Yes. So this is a big category that we're going to break down. Mutual funds, generally speaking, are for people who say, yeah, I don't know what stock or bond to buy, like not for me, and I need help, generally speaking. So let me give you an example. Let's say you and I say, no, thanks, not for me. I don't want to choose these investments. We want to pool our money together to create a mutual fund. Mutual fund. That's where that comes from.
Look at you all these years. I didn't know. I didn't get that.
So what that means is we're saying we don't know what we want to do. We want to pool our assets together, and we got to pay somebody to do this for us. And it could be a person, it could be a team who's trying to actually grow the money and try to outperform, if we were trying to do it ourselves.
Right.
That's a mutual fund, and that's what's called actively managed.
Okay.
Okay.
Because somebody else is doing it.
Somebody else is doing it.
Got it.
Right. And they're actively trying to make decisions to try to do well over time.
So different companies could slide in and out?
Different companies. It could be stocks. It could be bonds. There's all sorts of mutual funds. Okay. There's also a type of mutual fund called an index fund, which is similar, but there's no person trying to beat anything or it's still trying to grow. It's just trying to participate in whatever the investment. So if it's a stock index fund that could be tied to, let's say, the stock market, it's just going to do whatever the market does as opposed to paying a team a little bit more to try to beat the market, as an example. Same thing with bonds, generally speaking.
And a mutual fund feels more active.
Yes.
And an index fund feels more passive.
Yes,
Is that
that's
fair?
what's called passively managed. That's exactly right. Then the next part of this, you exchange what's called an ETF, an exchange traded fund. Okay. You can have it be actively managed or passively managed. But one of the major differences between mutual funds and index funds versus ETFs is when they trade throughout the day. So mutual funds and index funds trade at the end of the day. ETFs trade throughout the day.
Why does that matter?
It matters because let's say you want to sell something, you see a price that you like, or you want to buy something at 10:30 in the morning and you want that price. That's what an ETF does.
Okay.
Similar to that's what a stock does at the price, a price that you see it at the time.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you see a price on a mutual fund and you trade it at 10:30 in the morning, it's still not going to trade to the end of the day. Not better or worse, just different.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Okay, so you just walked through those investment choices. But then again, like as I'm looking at them, how do I choose? How do I make that decision?
I think going back to those questions I asked before, right? Do I want to do this? Do I have time to do this? Do I have the knowledge to do this? If you need some help, then there are really two paths you want to go to. One is either a fund that is diversified all by itself. There's commonly called target date funds. We see them a lot in 401ks. Lots of people are already invested that kind of way. So it's a mix of stocks, bonds, and cash. And then over time, it'll be tied to a date and get safer, let's say towards retirement.
Okay.
It'll get safer as you approach that goal. That's one version of help where you say, all I have to do is pick that fund and then just put money into it and automate it is what I'd want to see. And then of course there's full-fledged professional management that people can explore, but that's a whole other podcast.
But if this is not for me, I can tap somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Yeah. So kind of leaning into that, I'm gonna do it myself. I feel like now I'm ready to make a trade.
Yep.
Where do I start? What do I do there?
So that's going to all be based on where you trade. So the main thing to think about when you're actually going to place the trade is what are the costs affiliated with that? That's actually part of the research for the investment itself.
Okay.
Now at Fidelity, it's commission free to trade stocks most of the time. But you want to look into that when you actually go to do it, to physically go and buy. You can call your institution and ask how to do it, and you can do a lot of it online, but you want to know the cost affiliated with it too.
Why does the cost matter so much?
We want to make sure our cost is low as humanly possible, right? And it's the cost of whatever the actual trade is itself. Free is always better in my opinion, obviously. But at the same time, it's cost could be, if you do need it managed, how much would that cost? And what's the difference between you trying to tackle it yourself versus a cost invested? And what's the cost of not doing it? If not, you don't take action because you don't feel comfortable, and it might cost a little bit more to have somebody do it for you, but they are actually taking action, that might be worth the cost. So it's all an evaluation.
Yeah. So I feel comfortable. I have a portfolio. I'm ready to make trades. I'm doing it. How do I manage my account, so to speak, or how do I maintain it, as you say?
Yes, I use the word maintain really purposefully, because sometimes what I hear from clients is I look at my statement or I monitor, but I think of monitoring as just checking in, as opposed to maintaining is always making sure it's working for that framework we talked about. Remember the who, the what, and the when, right? Is it still serving those goals? And I think of maintaining like you would maintain your yard or your garden or, a plant that you might have, depending. You don't just monitor your yard, or else, oh boy, it's going to be, grass higher than you. So you have to maintain it over time. Do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to hire somebody to do it? It's the same type of thing. It's just investing is, another one of those categories.
Okay. So you've given me the confidence. I want to get started. Let's remind people of the top steps.
Yeah. So first, remember, remove the fear. That's where to start. Okay. So remove the judgment-free zone. That's what we're doing here from investing. Second is you want to make sure you open the account. You put money into the account. And what I would say is the foundation of all of this is make a plan for this. These are not, things that are in a silo by themselves. Think about that framework that you really want to focus on for the who, the what, and the when. And then make those decisions within a framework. Don't be afraid, and you can totally do this. Don't be afraid to ask for help. just get started.
Brian, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been a blast.
Awesome. If you want to learn more or you're ready to start investing, check out our website. It's fidelity.com/money unscripted. You can also head to our show notes, and on both, there are links to articles and toolkits on the investing basics, a deeper dive into types of accounts and resources, and tips for new investors. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you next time on Money Unscripted. It's your life. Get your money's worth.
I don't think people ask the hairy, scary questions.
Having conversations at home around money, that was not a thing.
There's nothing to ever be embarrassed about.
How did you budget and save?
I didn't.
Every little bit counts.
None of it has been easy. There's been a lot of hard work.
Do you feel proud?
Incredibly proud about my accomplishments and proud about the journey itself.
Welcome to Money Unscripted, a podcast from Fidelity Investments. We're sharing your stories, talking about what's possible for your life and, of course, your money. I'm Ally Donnelly. Do you ever feel like everyone else has it all figured out? Spoiler, they don't. Today, we're talking financial literacy. A mouthful, but really, it's getting to the heart of the money basics that can help set us all up for success, like budgeting, saving, investing, and strategies for tackling that debt. I love this next story. It's about a teacher who, like so many of us, never talked about money as a kid, so didn't learn those basics until later in life. He'd say he's still learning, aren't we all? But you'll see, all the work he's done to build that financial foundation is paying off.
We gotta start wrapping up. We have class in 3 minutes. Let's go. Folks can open up their laptops. Go.
Steve Josard is a 7th grade English teacher and dean at the Epiphany School in Boston, serving families from economically disadvantaged homes.
The school has the motto of never giving up on a child. And so that child can grow into a 34-year-old man with 2 kids, and the school's still around and supporting and making sure that that person is successful.
Some of these images work really well.
Steve just described himself. You see, he's a teacher at Epiphany, but a graduate too. The son of hardworking Haitian immigrants, he knows what it's like to struggle.
My parents had to work a lot in order to afford a little.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think about being in high school and getting off from football practice and not having had enough money or a lot, like enough to buy lunch at school and coming home to figure out, okay, is my mom home? Has she cooked a meal?
Up until that point, he had only seen money, or lack of it, as a barrier. But when his parents scraped and saved enough to move out of public housing and into the first house of their own, he saw money as possibility.
We had a backyard. It was on a dead-end street. And so it was just felt really freeing. And I love that feeling. And I knew that was something that I wanted.
But that dream of home ownership would take a while. Bring me back to your 20s. How did you budget and save?
Yeah, so I didn't.
Then Steve got his job at Epiphany. He met his wife, Melissa, and they got a life-changing opportunity, a 1-bedroom staff apartment, rent-free. That's a huge stressor off.
Yeah. It was such a great opportunity financially. We would have stayed there forever,
right?
and saved. But we wanted to start a family together, and that just wasn't going to be the place for it.
He gives a lot of credit to Melissa for setting them on a path of intense budgeting and saving to try and reach their goals.
We were just really mindful of taking both our salaries and thinking about, okay, what do we need and what do we spend together?
Steve took classes, watched videos, read everything he could to learn more about his finances and how to manage them. And he took what he'd learned and the savings from living in staff housing, and they bought their first home.
We ended up landing on a 2-family house because of the financial opportunities that presented us.
As they raised their 2 beautiful girls, they bought a single family, keeping the multifamily as an income property. Do you feel like you've achieved financial freedom?
No, not at all. A lot of the decisions we've made, it's for the long term. And the long term is we're not even close to that.
What are some stressors?
Debt. It's a lot of debt. It's nice to say that, you own 2 homes, but we don't really, there are 2 mortgages that have to be paid. Think about my college loans, childcare, credit card bills. That is something that we're working on. I think that the more that debt is reduced, the more we move to financial freedom.
Somebody watching this could say, he got free housing for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
He had it easy. I don't have that. I don't have family money to buy me a house.
None of it has been easy. There are ways in which that I've been really lucky, and I definitely want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of hard work with that luck as well.
So knowing where you've been, what you've been through, and where you are now, what would you tell your younger self or one of your students?
I think about my students. I think about one student in particular. He didn't see home ownership being something that he could have access to. And so I think about, for me, I was able to see it with my parents. But I think that for younger Steve, even before my parents purchased the home, and then for my students, is that there are ways in which you can achieve things that you don't immediately see.
Do you feel proud?
Incredibly.
Why?
I am setting things up for my children, and it's just really nice thinking about my 2 girls, and I love seeing them run up and down the stairs of our house now. That is significantly bigger than any space that I had as a kid.
And you did that.
Yeah.
Oh, so sweet. Like Steve, we all have goals. Maybe it's saving for a home, or paying down that credit card debt or student loans, or maybe it's just getting by. But how do we get there? So we're going to cover a lot of ground today, from budgeting and savings to managing debt to investing 101. And here to help us is Fidelity's Kelly Lannon. She helps people engage with their finances more, like so many of us do here at Fidelity. Hey, Kelly, thanks.
Hi, Ally. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. It was great to hear about Steve, too.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Wonderful.
So, just like Steve, getting to those goals, I know you like to start people out with budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And I got to say, just the word can turn people and be like, I don't want anything to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's the first step, right? People hear that word and like you just cringe. I feel like you just probably said it and people listening in are probably like, oh gosh, we're going to talk about budgeting. So, but really, how I like to think about budgeting is it's like a plan, right? Mm-hmm. It's a plan for your money, and your money touches every aspect of your life. And Ally, think about how many times you've planned today, right? You probably planned what you were going to wear. You're probably planning, what you're going to do over the weekend. I'm already planning what the heck my kids are going to eat for dinner later today, right? So think about how many times we plan throughout the course of the day. And that's not intimidating by any means. That's just what we have to do. So don't we think it's equally as important to start to establish a plan when it comes to your money?
Okay, so walk us through what a good budget looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think before even looking at what a good budget looks like, I always urge people to take a step back. Try to get an understanding of what's coming in. And really what I mean by that is how much you're getting paid, whether you're getting paid weekly, biweekly, monthly, really have an understanding of what's coming in. And that's after taxes. Okay. Uncle Sam gets his first. And then once you have a good understanding of that, then understanding what's coming out. And that's really how I first look at my budget. That actually can dictate, any spending that happens. And then I look at my money, and how I really view my money is bucketed in 4 specific categories. The first is those essential expenses, right? Ally, like the things we can't live without, the things we need to spend money on, or we're going to get kicked out of our house, rent, mortgage payments, money for groceries, money for food. Exactly. Daycare. We should do a whole episode on that, right? So daycare, the essential expenses, the things you have to spend money on each and every month, each and every week, whatever that may be. And then I look at the non-essential expenses, the discretionary expenses. Those are the things that could we maybe live without some of those? Of course, but those are also the things that make us happy. And why do we work so hard, right? You want to spend money on the things that make you happy. And then I look at kind of those longer term things that I have in the horizon, whether that's saving for something like retirement or saving for a house or a car one day. And then the shorter term things, something like an emergency fund, which I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later today, or emergency savings, or maybe going on a vacation in a couple months.
It's interesting because you talk about budgeting, and for so many, it feels like a chore.
Yeah.
But then you talked about enjoying your money. So how is that a tool for getting to do that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. When you start to make that budget, when you start to have that plan, it starts to bring you a little bit of flexibility and really understanding where your money's going. And I don't think it has to be a scary thing. Just spend a few minutes every day jotting down some things in your phone, right? Jotting down your plan for your money, having understanding of a plan for your money, and then come back to it time to time. It doesn't have to be a big chore, but while you're sitting there, whether you're watching TV or you're waiting for your kid to go on that potty. I'm in potty training time, Ally, let me tell you, go back and check on that plan.
Yeah.
And then you have a better understanding, and then you'll feel a little bit more comfortable of knowing where your money's going and spending it on those things that make you happy.
Lots of good easy apps too.
Mhm.
You talked about knowing what you make, your take home pay after taxes. But what if it's not predictable? You're getting paid different amounts each month.
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because, and I see this in my work, especially with our younger generation, next generation, but it spans the generation. A lot of folks have a side hustle.
Yeah.
A lot of folks work in the gig economy. And so they don't have that consistent pay, month over month, week over week, whatever it is. So, what I recommend is take a look at, your pay over a specific time period. Let's say month. Take a look at what you're averaging. Let's say you're averaging about, 2,000 to 5,000. We'll just use rough terms.
Yeah.
I would plan your budget based upon that 2,000, base it upon the lower amount, and really use that as the understanding of what's coming in, right?
Okay.
If you do the lower amount, chances are you're going to be making more than that, which is great. But then you have a little excess spending money. You've baked a little flexibility in your budget, so you don't have to worry each and every month, oh my goodness, I'm going to go over and go over again.
Yeah.
So that's just a little small tip that I like to recommend to folks who maybe have kind of more of that gig worker and they're getting paid a little bit more inconsistently.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know there's no one size fits all budget, but do you have some good guidelines of what it should look like?
So how I think of budgeting is through really general guidelines. So the majority of your money coming in after taxes, that should really be earmarked towards those essential expenses, the things that you can live without, the things that you consistently have to pay off, every week, every month, whatever that is. So the biggest percentage of your money should go towards that. And then we go down to the next bucket, smaller percentage, make sure it's not too high, is a discretionary spending. Those are the things that, could you live without? But it's also the things that make you happy, the nice pair of shoes, the trip with your family. You want to make sure that you have a certain percentage allocated to that.
Yep.
And finally, we have your emergency fund. A smaller percentage would go to your emergency savings. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but you always want to make sure that you have money saved aside in case of an emergency.
What about retirement?
Yeah, good question. Right about it now. First things first, if you're someone who has access to a workplace retirement account, either a 401k, if you're in the for-profit sector, or a 403b, like Steve, who's a teacher, or someone who works in the non-for-profit sector, hospitals, for example, are a good example of that. That is a workplace retirement account. And step one would be to take advantage of that, take advantage of that. Make sure you're either opting in or do not opt out if you're already opted in through your workplace.
Yeah.
And that is a terrific way of your employer saying, hey, I like you, Ally. I like you, Kelly. I want you to retire one day, and we're going to help you to do that. Another thing that a lot of employers do, and this is something I actually learned when I started to work at Fidelity, is that they offer something called a match. So let's give an example. Let's say your employer has a 3% match. What this is saying that if you are also contributing 3% of your paycheck into your workplace retirement account, let's say it's a 401k, your employer will also match up to that 3% into your workplace retirement account as well. And honestly, it's like free money.
And what do you say to people who say, hey, that's 3% I can't miss out of my paycheck?
So that's a great question. And I know that many people feel that way. The biggest thing that I would say is to automate it.
Yeah.
Automatically set it to the 3% coming out of each and every paycheck. Set it aside for yourself, get that out of the way. And candidly, you won't even miss the money. One thing just to add, Ally, because I think there's probably some listeners out there who are like, I don't have access to, workplace, retirement account. And that's okay too, because we also have something called individual retirement account, IRAs out there, a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. The difference between the two is how we treat them from a tax perspective. But those are also accounts that if you don't have access to a workplace retirement account, you can actually open that on your own. And that is also an option for everyone out there listening who might be thinking that themselves.
And that stays with you for life.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And, something else on both of those notes, someone said this to me when I started working at Fidelity, when I opened, had that 401k. If you are investing for your retirement, if you're putting money aside for your future, you are an investor, right?
Yes.
You might not think it, you might not believe it,
Yeah.
but you are an investor and you should take pride in that. And that should be something that helps build your confidence that you're really making your money work a little harder for you.
Yeah, it's a great call out. Just hearing that
Mhm.
title feels good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I tamed the beast. I've created this budget. How often do I need to revisit it?
Yes. And so, like I said, it's something to check into here and there. It's something to check into if you go through a life event or a life stage, such as, having children, getting married, buying a house, switching jobs, taking on a new opportunity, which may pay more or pay less. These are all really good times to take a step back and make sure that the budget you've set up is working for you.
Yeah. I mean, it puts a lot of focus on the positive, but honestly, obviously, like things go wrong. Cars break down, a dentist bill, I lose my job. How do I start thinking about an emergency savings plan or an emergency fund and how much I should put into it?
This is a great question because this is really core, in my opinion, to any sort of budget. Often this is one of the first things that we ask anyone when they're really starting to think about their money for the first time. Do you have money set aside in case the unexpected happens? Because we know that it does.
Yeah.
And so when I think of emergency savings and what works really well for me is that I keep it in a separate account. I keep it separate from the rest of my money, my spending bucket, if you will. I have a separate bucket for it that I kind of keep to the side. Now that works fairly well for me. It's obviously different for everyone else.
Yeah.
But the other tool that I do, and I've already actually referenced it once today, is automate. I automatically have a set amount coming out of my paycheck each and every time I get paid that automatically goes to my emergency fund. Similar to my comment about retirement, I set it. I don't have to think about it. I'm not going to miss that money. It's going in there. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be big.
Yeah.
We have certain guidelines. For example, we always recommend, set a buffer of about $1,000, right? Start there, set about $1,000 just in case, but start with $20, every paycheck. Start with $20 every other paycheck. If you're just doing this consistently, no matter what the amount, it will pay off in the long term. And for those who might be a little bit further along in their journey, because again, we love guidelines here at Fidelity, you have the $1,000, you're being pretty consistent by putting the money into that account. Make sure that you take a step back and roughly try to cover about 3 to 6 months of your essential expenses. That's another guideline. I know some people like to really hear that. Well, after the 1,000, what do I do next?
Right,
and that's also what we say.
3 to 6 months for a lot of people feels very out of reach.
Yeah. And so I, again, go back. Every little bit counts.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts. It doesn't matter how small. If you are, being consistent, if you're putting money set aside, if you automate, that will add up in the long term.
Okay. You talked about retirement accounts. So we've covered a little bit, but dig in a little deeper. So beyond budgeting and saving, what if I want to start investing? And I love that you said if you have a retirement account, that you're already an investor.
So yes, let's reiterate that. I think that's a really important thing. But the way I think of investing is, putting a little muscle behind your savings, right?
Yeah.
But it's a way of actually putting your money not in a traditional bank account, not in a high yield savings account, but putting into the stock market and kind of letting compounding take over. Albert Einstein, smart guy, he said that was literally the eighth wonder of the world. That is one of the most powerful things. And that's actually getting returns on top of your returns and letting your money build interest. So it's a really powerful thing. And why investing for something, playing the long game is a really important thing everyone should know.
You think about the language of investing and it seems like, oh, that's for other people. So boil it down for us. Give us some straight up definitions. Let's just define what investing is.
Yeah. So investing is putting your money aside and investing in assets such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, the list goes on.
How do I pick those? That seems daunting. That seems like a lot.
Yeah. I think first comes to first is that you have to take a step back and you have to understand what are your goals? Right? What are your goals? Are you looking more short-term? Are you looking more long-term? So that's always step number one. Step number two is actually understanding your risk tolerance, right? And what I mean by risk tolerance is how much, are you willing to risk if the market, goes up and down? Because it does. The other thing too is that when you're investing, it is a longer-term game. It's for the longer term. And as a result, either because you're looking longer term, or we say this a lot to our younger customers, because you're young, you're able to weather the ebbs and flows of the stock market because you don't need that money for a while. And as you know, Ally, investing always involves risk.
Yeah.
So we always want to make note of that when we're talking about that subject. So number one is the goals. Number two is really understanding what your risk tolerance is. And number three is actually going and picking the investment options that might be right for you. A stock is you're actually investing investing in a company. And depending on how that company does, if they have a good or bad quarter, if your money is in that particular stock, it will go up and down. Stocks do carry a little bit more risk just because it is unknown, but that could be an option. A bond is something, it's basically like an IOU where you're actually loaning money, to a company or the government. And what they're doing is that quarter over quarter, you're getting a little bit of an interest payment back. And then when the bond expires, you actually get your money back in full. So that's another thing. And then cash actually is also an investment option too. So what we say about this is really understanding your goal, which is based on your time horizon, your risks, that can determine what you put in your portfolio. And then you really just want to make sure that you have the proper asset allocation. If your time horizon is a little bit more out, maybe you'll have more stocks.
Asset allocation, Kel.
Yes, exactly. Asset allocation, and that is basically, have you heard the term, don't put all your eggs in one basket?
Yeah.
That's what it is. You never want to have, all your eggs in one particular investment option because, if you drop your eggs, you can't eat breakfast. If you have everything in one, option, you're just opening yourself up to more risk. So asset allocation, diversification is another term too. Those are usually used interchangeably.
Okay.
Asset allocation is really focused on those investment options, the stocks, bonds that we spoke about. Diversification, that's really focused on industry, the retail industry, the tech industry. And so what you want to do, and honestly, regardless of age, regardless of risk factor, I recommend everyone, you just want to spread it out. Because if you have everything in one spot and something happens, you're just opening yourself up to more risk.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, debt management. Most Americans are dealing with some kind of debt, whether it's a mortgage or a car payment or student loan debt, credit cards. Credit card debt is the highest it's been in American history. So how do we start taking a bite of that apple?
Yeah. I think the first thing, and I don't always love to say this, but it's true. At one point in our lives, we will all find ourselves in debt, right? And, how I look at debt is there's good debt and there's bad debt. Now, let's also be very clear. Even the good debt, I don't think it ever feels good,
It's
right?
still debt.
It's still debt, right? And, debt causes stress. And so a lot of what we do here at Fidelity is try to educate people on how to, handle their debt to alleviate some of that stress. Examples of good debt, right? Or student debt. You need to take on debt in order to put yourself through college, get the job you want one day. Another example is a mortgage payment. You're actually taking out a mortgage, a loan to purchase a house to one day actually own an asset. And then you have the bad debt, especially credit card debt, right? The credit card debt, if you have that, it can affect your credit score. Depending on what you want to do with your money, having a bad credit score can really be detrimental because it is the thing that can give you a good rate on your mortgage. Credit score, for better or worse, it's a report card. Right?
Yeah.
It's a report card. It's a score that people look at to understand if they can trust you with things, if they can trust you with money. So credit card debt, bad debt. Now, as I said before, it never necessarily feels good, even if it's good debt. And so, there's really two methods that I often look at, when I'm telling people or talking to people and educating them on what debt to pay off first. And we live in New England. Ally knows that. For everyone listening, we live in the New England area. So we're used to snow. For those listening who've never seen it, we're jealous. I don't know why we live here sometimes, but they both have to deal with snow, right?
Yep.
So we have the snowball and avalanche.
Okay.
So snowball, what we look at there is balances. And typically a strategy here is pay off and look at the lowest balances first and work your way through that. So write down all your debt, the lowest balances, start with that. Once you pay that off, any money that was going to that first debt, put it towards the next lowest balance and so on and so forth. So that's the snowball.
Okay.
Then we have avalanche, and this actually deals with interest rates. So for this one, you actually take a look at the interest rates and the debt that you have with the higher interest rate, that's what you tackle first. So you tackle that one first. And once you pay that off, you put the money that you're putting towards that debt towards the next highest interest rate. And then you go down the list like that. So you really have to, choose what works best for you. But those are two strategies. Those are two options to really approach how you're paying down your debt. What we also lean into is kind of the rule of 6, right? Any debt that has a 6% interest rate or more, typically those are the debt you should tackle first before the other one. So if the two specific strategies don't work, you just want to kind of something a little bit more simple, focus on the interest rates, rule of 6, anything that has 6% interest rate or more, possibly look at that one first.
Okay. As we wrap up, any final thoughts you want to leave people with?
Yeah. First of all, if you're listening to this today, first of all, kudos and thank you, because that's a big step. Ally, we've talked about this. I don't think people talk about money enough, right? I don't think people ask the hairy, scary questions. No one wants to feel dumb. No one wants to feel like, well, everyone knows this except me. So I would just leave everyone who's listening in is talk about money. Ask questions, find trusted people in your life, turn to podcasts like this that can help you work through these things. There's nothing to ever be embarrassed about because chances are if you have that question, a lot of people around you have the same question. And, we just want everyone to get everything they want, out of their life, and money can help them do that. And our goal is to build the confidence to help you do just that.
Awesome. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks to Kelly, and thanks to all of you for being here. If this conversation has motivated you to take more control of your money, check out our website. It's fidelity.com/money unscripted. We have links on how to create that budget, strategies to pay off debt, and save for your future. Be sure to like, follow, share the podcast, and we'll see you next time on Money Unscripted. It's your life. Get your money's worth.
Welcome to Fidelity Viewpoints, making a plan for retirement income. I'm Heather Hedges with Fidelity, and this chapter is called Go From Saving to Living in Retirement. If you're watching this, then congratulations. You probably spent much of your life working hard, and now the prize is finally in sight, retirement. So this chapter is going to talk about how to transition from saving to living in retirement. That involves looking at the math, of course, but also the emotions involved in the process. And we're going to walk you through the key potential retirement risks. So to talk about those things, I'm joined by Ryan Victorin, Vice President here at Fidelity and a financial consultant in the Boston area. She holds the CFP designation, and she's been a consultant for 15 years and helps clients build and maintain their retirement plans. And Scott McDonald, Vice President, Wealth Management, who also holds a CFP designation and has 20 plus years as a subject matter expert in the field of retirement income. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Well, I want to start off by acknowledging first and foremost that this is a huge transition, right? Because most of us spend the majority of our lives focused on working, and saving our nest egg for retirement. So I'd really like to talk about this transition, not just on a numbers level, but on an emotional level. Ryan, when you sit down with your clients, I'm curious, have you found that they are emotionally and mentally prepared for all of this?
Yeah, I actually think this is something that people don't mentally prepare for enough. And then when they get there, they're surprised by how much of an emotional challenge it really is. And I mean, on the one hand, it's really an exciting time because you can think about living the life you've in retirement that you've worked so hard for. But on the other hand, when you actually get to that moment of transition, it can be, kind of stressful and you're going through a lot of emotions at once. And then the other thing to remember is that for decades, the focus has been save your money and grow your money. And then once you retire, the focus shifts to use your money and make sure that it lasts. And this mental shift is arguably one of the most challenging things that my clients deal with. And I think it's where professionals like me can really help you in that transition from saving in retirement to living in retirement.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ryan. It's a lot to wrap your head around. What comes to mind is an experience that I had with my son years ago that I think may be a helpful analogy in understanding what it's like. When my son was 7, I took him to climb Mount Monadnock in New Hampshire. He was extremely excited as we started. He was eager to climb over every rock. And as we progressed, he grew more confident with the trail. And at times he stumbled a little, but kind of fell into the mountain. So no big deal. After taking in some amazing views from the top, we started to make our way down. Callan, though, thought it would be better to crouch down and slide along these long, flat rocks. So I had stopped him right away and explained if he slipped and went head over heels, he would be hurt badly. When he misstepped or stumbled at the beginning on the way up, the stakes were pretty low. He probably wasn't going to get hurt. But if he fell forward at the top of the mountain near the start of our descent, it could have been disastrous. It's a familiar parallel with the experience of growing your savings to then for the very first time needing to live off of your savings. Both have risks, but these risks are very different. Paychecks from work are going to stop. What was once regular money coming in is now money going out, or it's becoming less if you're working part-time. It can be daunting and uncomfortable, but that's okay. With preparation and support, you can do this.
I love that analogy. I think the analogies are just so helpful for us understanding, what it's going to be like. So thanks for sharing that, Scott. Ryan, I know you talked about how clients are surprised by how hard it can be to start thinking about spending down their savings often. And I think I used to think of financial consultants as number crunchers. Yes, obviously you do that, but you also do so much more than that, I'm learning. Can you talk about how you and your team really coach clients to follow through with it despite it all feeling so uncomfortable at times?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we really do love our numbers. Okay. But, and honestly, it may sound a little bit hokey, but I do ask them to visualize what it's going to be like when the paycheck stops and then just sit with that for a little bit. And then my clients start to tell me how they feel about the idea and how comfortable or uncomfortable they might be with it. And I just want them to visualize some of the pain points, honestly, that might happen in retirement so that they're ready. So things like what it would be like to be in the throes of a recession and you have to withdraw your money and you're not saving it anymore. These moments can be difficult to live through. So I'm just trying to help them prepare for these moments before they happen.
Yeah, certainly. And this is where mistakes can be made, especially during challenging market times when emotions run high. That's really why you need a plan. We need to figure out how to build a plan that is going to be mathematically sufficient, but also is a good fit for what you want and you need to do.
Yeah. And as someone who really helps clients make these plans all the time, I often say, listen, I might not be 65 and heading into retirement, but I've gone through retirement about 1,000 times with my clients. So we try to find a way to be comfortable with making the math work, but a plan that you're comfortable and that you can stick with. And we have experience doing this. So we know that the financial planning process allows clients to move away from an emotionally reactive state to proactively preparing for the risks that face us in retirement.
That's a lot of going through retirement, Ryan, and you still have so much energy. Let's go deeper a little bit on those risks that we face in retirement that you mentioned, Ryan. Scott, why don't you start us off and walk us through those risks and touch on how planning can help protect against those risks?
Sure. There are 5 key risks that we want clients to understand and be prepared for. Withdrawals, inflation, longevity, medical costs, and asset allocation. These risks apply to everyone, no matter how much money you've saved. So first is withdrawals. And this comes into play when you start to draw down on your retirement savings. During the planning process, we'll help you understand a targeted withdrawal rate and determine whether or not it's sustainable. We'll get into more of that later in the discussion. But in other words, we want to ensure that you don't overdraw the funds during your lifetime and run out of money. As you can imagine, the less you withdraw from your portfolio, the longer your money will last. This can be pretty intuitive, but I love supporting this idea with a visual. As shown here, there's a huge difference when someone in their mid-60s in a balanced investment strategy has an inflation-adjusted withdrawal rate of 4% versus 5, 6, or 7% rate. While the difference may seem minor, it can have big implications for how long your money will last. In this case, the 4% withdrawal rate would not only have preserved the savings, but also allowed the money to grow. While the 6% rate would have depleted the savings by the time this person is 81 years old. And that leads me to the next risk, inflation. You'll have to account for the fact that things will cost more. Your purchasing power can decrease over time. So your plan should keep pace with rising costs. Third, longevity. We're living longer, and that means your money needs to last longer than in past generations.
Yeah, and the elephant in the room here with retirement planning is that it's hard to guess how long you're going to live.
Right. Yeah, that seems like, something nobody can predict, right? How do you do that?
Right. And it is an uncomfortable thing to think about. However, we need to ensure your money lasts as long as you do. With many people retiring earlier and living longer, you may spend nearly the same amount of time in retirement as you did during your working years. Fourth, medical costs. Most of the time, we can't predict our health in the future, and we know that medical costs continue to rise. So you should make sure that you have an estimate of how much you might need for medical expenses and have the money allocated to cover them, including unexpected health care and long-term care costs that may surface. The last risk is allocation. And this means having your money invested in a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, which can help weather changing markets and give you the confidence to stay invested along the way.
Wow, that's a lot to think about, Scott. So how do we protect ourselves from these risks? And also from a big one, which is the fear of running out of money, which I think is something we can all relate to. Ryan?
Yeah, it's an incredibly common fear. And it's actually the fear that can stop us from spending the money we've worked our entire career for, and therefore not living the life we hope to in retirement. But it also stops us from planning altogether, because sometimes we're just scared of the result. But the thing is, it is the process of looking at the numbers and creating a plan itself that can help alleviate the fear and help you feel so much better. And I know we're going to get into the details, of this in the next chapter, but I'm just going to ask everyone to just push through the fear. Stay with us. It is what we are here for.
All right. Trust you, Ryan. I'm going to push through the fear and stay with you. And to synthesize what you just said, I think having a plan also gives you the grace to know when you can say, it's okay for me to spend this. And I think sometimes just giving yourself that permission can be such a relieving feeling. So thanks for laying all of that out for us, Ryan and Scott. And to recap the big takeaways from our discussion, first, acknowledging the transition to retirement can be both exciting and stressful at the same time. And this can lead to some emotional decisions if you're not prepared. There are some key risks that we have to be mindful of throughout the planning process, and we need to build a plan that helps to mitigate those risks. So in the next chapter, we're going to go a little bit deeper on the major components of a retirement income plan. But for now, for Fidelity, I'm Heather Hedges.
That's the inside. That is all your work stuff.
Welcome to Fidelity Viewpoints, making a plan for retirement income. I'm Heather Hedges with Fidelity. This chapter is called Understand the Pieces of a Retirement Income Plan. So if you watched our last chapter, we laid out the risks that retirees face, as well as the emotions that come with this massive transition in your life. And now we're going to go into the specific components of what makes up a retirement income plan. So with me again are our retirement income specialists, Ryan Victorin, Vice President and a Greater Boston-based financial consultant, and Scott MacDonald, Vice President, Wealth Management here at Fidelity. Thanks to both of you again for making the time.
Thanks for having us.
I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you both. All right, let's start off by defining exactly what a retirement income plan is for everybody out there. Scott, how would you explain it?
Yeah, at the most basic level, a retirement income plan is a map or blueprint to how you'll spend your retirement savings in a measured way. It's a detailed report that shows where and how your savings are going to be spent throughout your retirement. And it should help you make sure your retirement savings last, match your retirement vision with your financial situation, perhaps build a legacy for your family, and feel prepared for what's ahead.
Okay, and generally, when should you start documenting and developing that plan?
Yeah, so I work with clients of all ages, but I do see a pretty big uptick in requests to dive deeper on retirement income plans when clients are in their, mid 50s, because traditionally we see people retiring somewhere in their 60s, but everybody is different. So I have some clients who want to be done working at 55, and then some who want to just keep working into their 70s. And while there's no set number necessarily, it's within about 5 years of income slowing or stopping that you really want to start to put a plan in place. But don't worry, if you have less than 5 years to go, or you're even in retirement right now, it is not too late to put a plan in place.
Okay. So within 5 years of when your steady stream of income slows or stops, that's when you start the preparations. Okay, got it. Let's talk about when that time comes, what is step one in developing that plan? What would you say?
Well, first, you want to think about what you want your retirement to look like. And I say to my clients, paint me a picture of your vision of retirement and ask yourself, what's most important to you and who's most important to you? And, what do you want to do? Do you want to travel, spend time with kids or friends, or help your community or causes you care about, or even move to a dream retirement spot, or, leave a legacy to your kids? Think about it and write it down. But another important point here is that it's not always about wants in retirement. Sometimes that picture is shaped around what you need. And I'll give you a personal example. I'm one of 5 children, and I have an older sister with Down syndrome and 3 younger brothers. So my sister will never be fully independent, and she'll always need support, including financial assistance. So my parents' major concern is leaving assets behind so that she's taken care of. And, the coordination and the financial responsibility doesn't have to fall on me and my 3 brothers. So me, to figure out how to support her. Their entire retirement picture is wrapped around that primary goal.
Wow, Ryan, thanks so much for sharing that. Caring for those we love can be a really big consideration for many people. Another consideration is for those retiring with someone like a partner or a spouse. You've got to be on the same page. It's incredibly common when a couple retires to have one person who's leading the plan or investment strategies, the other is taking more of a back seat. And I get it. We're busy, divide and conquer, right? Both individuals need to be part of the planning discussion. Both of you need to answer the questions Ryan just mentioned, like what kind of life do you want to live in retirement? How do you want to get there together? It's commonly known women tend to live longer than men and may find themselves in a situation where their planning partner passes away before them. And in the midst of dealing with the grief of losing a loved one, now 2 other things have happened. The finances have changed and the plan must evolve. I really believe it's important that both partners are at least aware of the plan.
Yeah. And also, I want to add here, the person who's a little bit less interested in being involved at the onset, they don't have to become an expert in the fine points of the plan, but I agree. They should at least know that it exists.
Yeah, it should be a living, breathing, actual document that's easily accessible, that your partner knows where to find it and could put their hands on it. It should be able to change as your life changes.
Such a great point, Scott, that it needs to be where you know where it is, that you can put your hands on it and you can physically touch it. Okay, so we have that vision, Ryan. And then what do we do? What's next?
So next is understanding the expenses that support that vision and your day-to-day needs. And we think about expenses in 2 main categories, essential and discretionary. And when it comes to essential expenses, we're talking about the categories you would expect, food and housing and taxes, but also this is where we capture the costs associated with one of those risks that Scott mentioned in the first chapter, the medical costs, okay? But essential expenses are also things that sometimes we call non-negotiable to you. And sometimes those are needs, like in my family's case for caring for my sister. And sometimes they're expenses that might help you maintain a sense of fulfillment. So let me give you an example. I have a client who told me that one of her expenses is an annual trip to Australia, which to me sounded like an optional fun trip at first, until she told me that's where her grandbabies are. And it's a yearly non-negotiable expense for her. And, we helped build her whole plan around that. Okay. The second category of expenses would be considered discretionary or flexible. This could be the fun stuff like dining out or taking a trip. And I tell my clients, write it all down. We have so many budgeting apps and worksheets available online to help you do this.
All right, so you can either write it down if you're a pen to paper person like me or use an app. That all makes total sense, Ryan. And I love you sharing, by the way, about that client. After we do all of this, right, and after you categorize and capture your expenses, then what do we do? What's the next step from there, Scott?
Yeah, the next step would be to identify your sources of predictable income in retirement. Now, Fidelity believes your essential expenses should be covered by predictable income sources. We're putting the 3 main ones on your screen. They are Social Security, pensions, and certain types of annuities. You can think of these as your retirement-based salary. It's the cash flow you can count on every month for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. These predictable sources of income can address longevity risks, as I mentioned earlier in Chapter 1. Let's first talk a little more about Social Security. This will likely be a primary source of retirement income for most of us, and you'll want to know your options before claiming your benefit. Many people wait until full retirement age, which for most will be age 66 or 67. The Social Security Administration also allows you to claim early benefits at age 62. However, your benefit will be reduced. Also, you may delay your benefit until age 70, which will boost your income by 8% for each year beyond full retirement age. And finally, married couples have additional options to consider when claiming their benefit. Fidelity has a tool that can help you decide by estimating how much you might receive at different ages, whether you're married, divorced, single, or widowed. And at the end of this chapter, there will be a QR code that will take you there.
All right, so I'll jump in here and mention the second source of predictable income, which is pensions. Candidly, though, not as many people have access to pensions nowadays, but I'll explain them. They are an employer-sponsored form of retirement income. And there's many different kinds of pensions. There's military, government, teacher pensions, and then, of course, those sponsored by private companies. So just like how Scott was describing the complexities around Social Security for a couple versus someone who's single, the same idea applies to pensions. Those considerations are usually tied to when and how to take it, and also why it's important that that decision is made within the context of the whole plan. Because once you make those elections, you can't change it.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And the third source of predictable income is a guaranteed income annuity. Annuities are becoming more common, and we've been getting more client questions about them over the last several years, especially with pensions going away. An annuity is a contract that's issued by an insurance company where you invest part of your savings in exchange for guaranteed income for the rest of your life or you and your spouse's lives. It's essentially like having your own personal pension. This is a simple way to generate reliable income to support your lifestyle, and you don't have to worry about the stock market volatility and fluctuating interest rates affecting your income at all. Now, there are different types of annuities and different customization options. Some annuities allow for the money to start now or the money to start in the future, and they can be customized with features such as cost of living increases and beneficiary protection. And something interesting that we're seeing is employers are now starting to help retirees and making it convenient for them by offering direct access to guaranteed income choices within the workplace plan. But you'd have to check with your employer to see if that's something that you do have access to.
I want to step in and focus a little bit more on the beneficiary protection feature that you mentioned, Scott, because there's some common misconceptions in this area. I get a lot of questions from my clients about what happens to the assets you invest in annuity when you pass away. And I would hear things like, okay, I get that it's income for life, but if I buy annuity and it passes away a year later, well, then the insurance company gets all of my money. And this is actually not true. You have the ability to customize features of an annuity to ensure that if you pass away earlier than expected and there are assets left over, those assets can go to your beneficiaries. As with any investment, you always want to make sure you consider the provider, the terms, and the fees for annuities. And that's where a financial professional like me can help you sort through what all of this means, and especially if it feels overwhelming.
Okay, that is so helpful and reassuring. And thank you both for explaining those three main sources of predictable income. So once you have a clear picture of your expenses and your income sources, what do we do next?
All right, so then you want to take a look at the expenses you captured versus your predictable income sources to see if you have a gap between the two. And if you have a gap, the next phase of planning is dedicated to answering the question, how do we fill the gap? This is where we start to look at your savings and investments to see how they're set up to help with all of this.
Yeah, it's also important to acknowledge there are some people who don't have a gap between their income and expenses. For example, some people from your parents' or grandparents' generation may have access to a pension which would have covered all of their needs and they didn't have to dip into savings at all. But that's not the reality for the majority of people today. And to Ryan's point, most retirees today have to find ways to generate more income from savings that they'll have. Now, if you're one of the fortunate few who have all of your expenses already covered by Social Security or a pension, that's great. If that's the case, we can focus our attention on your growth goals and other financial objectives.
Okay, and we will dig more into that growth component later in this discussion. But I do want to stick right here for a moment with the concept of what to do if you have a gap between your income and your expenses. So Ryan, what do we do if we have a gap? How do we tackle that?
All right, so first, we want to figure out how your assets are organized, okay? And actually look at where are the assets, meaning literally which financial institutions are they held at. Then we want to look at what types of accounts do you have? 401ks, IRAs, brokerage accounts, health savings accounts, things like that. And then we want to look at how are the assets invested right now, meaning what's the allocation of stocks and bonds and cash in each account? And given that mix, how much income potential can come off of this portfolio? Note that I also said income potential and not return, okay? So let me break it down. Income from the portfolio usually comes from two categories: dividends off of stock and interest off of bonds. Okay. So once we have that captured, then we can use Fidelity tools to run an analysis to see A, whether the way you're set up right now can generate enough income to help fill the gap, and B, what types of withdrawals beyond the income generated are needed. And that's what's called the withdrawal rate that we talked about before. So one thing it's important to point out, I know we're talking a lot about income, but it is okay to have a withdrawal rate and actually spend your money. That is what it is there for. We just want to ensure that the withdrawal rate isn't too high to be sustainable, and we want to see whether any changes are needed to improve the overall plan.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ryan and Heather. And something to point out here, you've probably noticed that we haven't talked about making any changes yet. To this point in the planning process, we've focused on understanding where you are today, analyzing your current situation. Next, we can talk about exploring ways to strengthen your income plan.
All right. We'll think about that. But that's all great homework for all of us building out our retirement plans. I feel like we've got a lot of homework on our hands now. So we just covered the basics of a solid plan. And to recap for you, that includes prioritizing your essential expenses, identifying your predictable income sources, and then identifying any gaps between the two. So if you're near your screen right now, take out those camera phones, because here's a QR code to the Social Security benefit calculator that Scott mentioned that can help you decide when you might start claiming your Social Security benefit and determine how much that benefit could be. Together with Ryan Victorin and Scott McDonald, I'm Heather Hedges with Fidelity, and you've been watching Fidelity Viewpoints, making a plan for retirement income. Welcome to Fidelity Viewpoints, making a plan for retirement income. I'm Heather Hedges with Fidelity. This chapter is called Create Retirement Income While Protecting Your Savings. Up until this point, we've been discussing the transition from working and saving for retirement to actually living in it, and the importance of building a detailed income plan, which is a map of how to spend your retirement savings in a measured way. As part of that exercise, you might find that your essential retirement expenses aren't covered by your predictable income sources like Social Security, and there is a gap. In this chapter, we're going to talk about how we approach covering that gap and the importance of making sure that your money continues to grow in the years ahead. So joining me to talk about that once again are Ryan Victorin, a vice president and a financial consultant in the Boston area for Fidelity, who helps clients establish and maintain plans every day, and Scott McDonald, Vice President, Wealth Management, who has spent his entire career helping people with retirement income planning needs. Welcome back to both of you, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hopefully, you've had a chance to watch our previous chapters. Now we're at the point where we want to look at all of our assets and determine if our asset mix provides income through dividends off of stocks and interest off of bonds to cover the gap. So the question now is, what if after you go through that exercise, your asset mix doesn't do that? What should you do next? Scott, you want to tackle this one?
Sure. Again, at Fidelity, we believe your essential expenses should be covered by predictable income sources. And your discretionary or the nice to have expenses, they can be met by withdrawals from your portfolio. If there are essential expenses still unmet by your current lifetime income sources, this is where an income annuity may be a good fit for you. In the last chapter, we mentioned that annuities can make a lot of sense when we're faced with a gap. And the reasons we believe an annuity is a good consideration is because it can address two of the risks that we all face in retirement: longevity, because you can't outlive the income, and allocation or the markets, because the annuity payments do not fluctuate with the ups and downs of the markets. The last thing that we want you to do is jeopardize your ability to continue to afford what you've told us is most important. An income annuity addresses this challenge with certainty. And if your portfolio is unable to meet your spending expectations in retirement, you may have to make some changes, which may include either working a little longer, consider supplementing your income with part-time work, or reducing your expenses.
reducing your expenses is never the first preference, right? Never fun. So anything you would add here, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. I have actually a little bit of a qualitative addition to what, Scott just mentioned. The reason we stress the importance of predictable income goes back to where we started this whole conversation with how stressful and difficult staying invested can be in those times when you're watching your life savings affected by market turmoil that you just can't control. Now you add withdrawals on top of that scenario. And if it's, too much of your lifestyle moves with the winds of the stock and the bond market, it can lead to some emotional decision making. And the reality is the more you have in predictable income to cover those critical expenses that Scott mentioned, the less you really have to worry.
Well, I can see the value of covering those critical expenses with predictable income or guaranteed income. Well, it's okay to actually spend some of your money and therefore have a withdrawal rate. You just want to make sure it's not so high that it leads to a stressful experience, right? All right, let's move on to the next big piece of a plan, which is growth. So, Ryan, talk to me about why, even though you're retired, it does not mean that you shouldn't continue to grow your portfolio.
Sure. So once you go through all the steps we've outlined so far, you will know how much of your assets will be used to fund your retirement. And everybody's a little different. Some clients need every penny. Some clients are fortunate enough to be able to leave behind a legacy. And lots of clients are somewhere in the middle. And even if you need all of your money to support your retirement, there has to be a growth component to the plan. In fact, the more of the assets that you need to support your retirement, the more important it is to get the growth piece right. And you can't just keep it all under the mattress. Your money needs to work for you. And I totally get it. Our clients have worked so hard for their money, and sometimes we just find them like hanging on to their savings so tight and they're unwilling to risk it. And I know it feels like the safe thing to do. But what you have to realize is that not having a growth piece and therefore not participating in growth over time can potentially be more harmful than being invested and experiencing the markets up and downs.
Yeah, Ryan, you're absolutely right. And the other thing to point out here is that sometimes when we hear the word growth, it's really easy to make that leap automatically to think aggressive growth, all stock, ultra risky, and that is not what we mean. We're still talking about a diversified portfolio that's managed in a disciplined way with a primary goal of potentially increasing the account value over time. We use Fidelity tools to determine how much risk might be appropriate for you based on your personal situation. It's critical that we identify the right mix for you based on your criteria, your risk tolerance, time frame, and most importantly, one that you're comfortable sticking with even during challenging times. We know that things are going to be more expensive in the future, and having a plan for growth can allow you to potentially live comfortably throughout your retirement. So whether you're planning yourself or working with a professional to do it, we want to make sure that you have the tools available to potentially keep your money growing and working for you.
Wow, all of that makes sense for anybody who needs all of their assets in retirement, which is most of us. Ryan, I know you mentioned at the start of this discussion, though, that some people want to or need to leave behind a legacy. So I'd like to dive a little bit deeper on that topic now.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're fortunate enough to not need all of your assets for retirement, you could actually be planning with two goals in mind: retirement and legacy. Legacy being when you want or need to leave assets to the people or causes you care about once you pass away. This means that you could also have two growth components to your plan. The first could be the part of your portfolio dedicated to addressing inflation and rising costs in that retirement goal. And the second could be a part of your portfolio that, for lack of a better way of saying it, is for beyond your lifetime. And that means you might be fortunate enough to have assets that won't be even touched for 20, 30, or 40 years or more in some cases. And with that type of time horizon, a more growth-oriented portfolio could be beneficial.
Okay, well, that's helpful. And it really reinforces the importance of knowing how much to dedicate to each goal. I can see why having growth as a part of an overall plan really makes total sense. I'd like to talk now about the options that clients have for actually going about building a portfolio for growth. What are the options, Scott?
Yes, this is what's great about doing this within the context of your overall plan, because you'll have a great sense of your goal, what you need your portfolio to do at this point to help you achieve the goals, and how you're feeling about it, particularly from a risk standpoint. Once you have this understanding, you can land on an appropriate asset allocation and invest accordingly. But remember, Heather, this is not just a set it and forget it. As markets move, you should also be making adjustments.
It's a great point. I also think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to tackle all of this on our own. And the reality is, you have choices. And I work with all sorts of clients from an investment management perspective. I have some that absolutely love doing this. They want to be in the weeds and the details. They love using our tools and the resources online to support their investing needs. But I also work with clients who say, yeah, this is not for me. I need help. I need to outsource this. And we have a discussion about what type of professional management they really want to explore. Two other important points I want to make. One, there's no one way that you have to do it. And two, professional help is not just reserved for the wealthy.
Two great points there, Ryan. And we could probably have an entire discussion just dedicated to those last 2 points. But this highlights the importance of reaching out to us so that we can help you navigate all of this. You know, we talked in this chapter about what to do if there's a gap and why your plan needs to have a growth element to it in order to keep pace with inflation. And we talked about how even sometimes a secondary growth element is needed for those who are hoping to build a legacy plan. To recap, your retirement income plan is a living, breathing document, and you certainly don't want to set it and forget it. For help, you can reach out to us. You can go online to find more information, you can call us, or you can book an appointment online. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the instances where you'll want to make sure you're revisiting the plan to make sure it's still supporting the life that you're living. For Fidelity, I'm Heather Hedges. Welcome back to Fidelity Viewpoints, Making a Plan for Retirement Income. I'm Heather Hedges with Fidelity. This chapter is called Manage the Unexpected by Adjusting Your Plan. I hope you've had a chance to watch the previous 3 chapters of this webcast. So everything we've talked about so far has centered around setting up your plan. But then life happens, right? Either economic conditions change or even personal situations change or possibly both. So now we're going to talk about how to know when it is time to make a change to your retirement income plan and how to go about making those adjustments. And we're going to arm you in this chapter with some actionable next steps that you can start as soon as you finish watching this webcast. Once again, I'm pleased to be back with Fidelity's Ryan Victorin, Vice President and a financial consultant in the Boston area who helps clients establish and maintain plans, and Scott MacDonald, Vice President, Wealth Management, who's an expert in retirement income planning strategies. Welcome back once again to both of you.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks. Ryan, I know you talked earlier about how you've gone through this thousands of times alongside clients. Could you share with us what to do when the unexpected happens? In other words, how do you know when it is time to reevaluate your plan?
Well, first, I think it's important to understand that sometimes we actually have a misconception about what financial planning actually is. And the visual that comes to mind is that, you go through this big exercise and you do all of this work and you get this, inch thick printout that you stick on a bookshelf and then it just sits there collecting dust that we never, revisit again. And I get it. I acknowledge that this process is a little front end heavy to establish, but that's why we've been describing a retirement plan as a living, breathing thing that grows and adapts and adjusts with you as you go through your life. And just like anything else that's living and breathing, it has to be cared for and tended to so that when events outside of our control happen, we have a framework for how to adapt. And some examples, like you talked about before, are, major market events like a recession or personal events. And I don't just mean hardship events like, the death of a, family member or spouse or a significant change in your health. While those are important, I'm also talking about happy reasons to reevaluate your plan, like a marriage or grandchildren. So it's also good to review your expenses annually, especially because we've already talked about the importance of addressing inflation. And the reality is, even when we do set up a plan that tries to anticipate the risks we face in retirement, we can't foresee everything. And that's why financial planning also involves monitoring the progress to ensure that things are coming together in the way that we wanted and adjusting when needed.
Okay. Well, Ryan, you just hit on how market events and personal events could affect a plan. And I want to go a little bit deeper on market events specifically because, they not only affect everybody, but also there's so much information coming at us these days, it feels like, in the media and online. And it can be so easy to get wrapped up in the noise, right? And feel nervous and get worked up about what it all means. So, Scott, I was hoping you could kind of talk us through how we can navigate that.
Yes, it's human nature to be influenced by headlines and social media, which lead to emotional decisions, and acting on them may be inconsistent with your goals and harmful to your success over time. Sometimes you have to set this aside and not make rash decisions and instead keep focused on your goals. Through the planning process, we aim to minimize the impact of market events that you can't control. And if your plan is put under conditions that test it, having it documented can help us ensure you're remaining on track and it gives you perspective. And if you're unsure about the potential impact of market events or a change in your life, you can review your plan with a financial professional.
Okay, thanks, Scott. For clients planning with a spouse or a partner, I want to talk about how do you help clients plan for the difficult but pretty likely scenario that one person will pass away first? Should you get that detailed in the plan? Ryan, what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely do get that detailed. And, the reality is we try to plan for a variety of outcomes. And as you just mentioned, it's not uncommon to have a blended scenario when, one spouse or partner might pass away a little earlier, maybe in their 70s, and the other might live all the way into their 90s. And unfortunately, Heather, though, it's one of the most emotionally difficult aspects of what I do, but it's really important to talk about. And while there's absolutely no way to avoid the grief that comes with these moments, the more prepared the plan is for these moments, the less my clients have to worry about finances during that time, though. And it allows them to just, focus on their grief and really taking care of their family.
Yeah, and that's key, right, Ryan? You have to prepare for both scenarios. You have to be mindful of that. And the reality is when a spouse or partner passes away, the Social Security benefit picture will change. So the income in retirement is shifted. So the power of planning is really twofold. One, it accounts for these possibilities before they happen. And two, if they do happen, then we're better prepared to make these necessary adjustments.
I also want to say, you probably noticed that we've repeated a few times, refer back to the plan, create a plan, monitor the plan.
Go back to the plan, go back to the plan.
That is the point. Each of these events is when you should refer back to the plan. It's a constant monitoring.
Okay, that's an important point. You guys have been so great today. I have one final question for both of you, and that is, what should we do once we stop watching this webcast? What should be our very next step? Scott, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Get started. Gather all of your details, get organized, include your partner or spouse or whoever you're going through retirement with. I've been part of meetings where planning partners are totally on different pages, where one person says, this is exactly what we want, and the other immediately responds, absolutely not. So it's really a matter of trying to figure out the proper level of compromise and agreement and really to get on the same page.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, my suggestion is coming off of that first part is take action. You've put so much effort into understanding the exact steps to take to protect what you've worked so hard for and to continue to grow it so that you can live the life you always wanted to in retirement. So make sure you actually implement those changes. And we realize that this is complex and it can probably sound a little overwhelming, but that's what we are here to help you with. Call us. Go online, come visit us in an investor center. We want to see you and help you.
You are here to help. I got it. Thank you to both of you, Ryan and Scott. We covered a lot here. We hope that approaching and planning for how you'll manage your money in retirement now feels a lot less overwhelming after watching our webcast. So to recap, we talked today about the importance of getting organized and being honest, and how to go about identifying expenses and predictable income sources, and the importance of making a plan that addresses any gaps and also continues to grow your money throughout your retirement. We also discussed how to approach planning if there are partners involved. Both partners need to be aware of the plan. They need to participate to some degree and have a unified vision. And remember, everybody affected should be a part of that conversation. Also, a big one here. Remember, retirement income planning isn't one and done. It is something that you do need to monitor and revisit throughout your retirement. For those of you who are really close to making the jump to retirement, we hope this webcast energizes you to start your detailed retirement income plan now. You can visit our Planning and Guidance Center on our website, or if you need help, you can call us, or believe it or not, it's also free to set up an appointment with a professional just like Ryan. Or if you're at the stage where you're trying to visualize your retirement, well, we have a great digital planning experience available on our website for you called the Retirement Decision Guide. It can help you navigate many of the decisions that you'll have to make about your money, health, lifestyle, and loved ones. For Scott MacDonald and Ryan Victorian and everybody who is a part of this one, thanks so much for watching Fidelity Viewpoints, Making a Plan for Retirement Income. We wish you well as you prepare to embark on this exciting new chapter in your life.